Robert Wilson's heart nearly stopped when he saw it. There, gleaming under showroom lights behind the pristine glass of Preston Luxury Motors, sat his past, his youth, his greatest regret, a 1967 Ford Mustang Fastback in Highland Green. Not just any Mustang, but one that made his hand tremble as he clutched his wife Margaret's arm. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice breaking, "that's my car." The car he'd proposed in 50 years ago. The car he'd been forced to sell when everything fell apart. The car that now, with only months left to live according to his doctors, represented his final chance to recapture something precious before time ran out. Before we continue, comment from where you are watching from. Margaret glanced at her husband with concern. At 70, Robert moved slower these days, especially since the diagnosis 3 months ago. Terminal pancreatic cancer, 6 months left, perhaps less. "Are you getting tired, dear?" "We can head back to the car," Margaret suggested gently. Robert shook his head. "Not yet. I need to see it up close." The autumn breeze tousled his silver hair as they crossed the street toward the dealership. Margaret studied his face, seeing an emotion she hadn't witnessed since before his illness. Hope. "Just like mine," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. "Exactly like the one I had when we met." Margaret squeezed his hand. The Mustang had been Robert's pride and joy as a young man. He'd proposed to her in that car parked at Sunset Point overlooking the city. They'd driven it on their honeymoon. And then, 30 years ago, when Robert's small construction business collapsed during the recession, the Mustang had been the first thing he'd sacrificed to keep food on the table for their family. "Let's go look at it," Margaret suggested. Robert hesitated, glancing down at his worn jacket and comfortable shoes. "Places like that aren't for folks like us anymore, Maggie." "Nonsense. We're just looking. They can't stop us from looking." With gentle persistence, Margaret guided him across the street. As they approached the dealership, Robert slowed, staring at the Mustang with increasing intensity. "It can't be," he muttered. "What is it?" "The color. It's the exact shade. Most people think all Highland Green Mustangs look the same, but there were variations. This one, ... They pushed through the glass doors into a world of luxury. Polished marble floors reflected spotlights aimed at vehicles most people would only ever dream of affording. A few salespeople glanced their way before returning to conversations with better-dressed prospects. Robert made his way directly to the Mustang, moving with more purpose than Margaret had seen in months. He circled it slowly, bending to examine details despite the stiffness in his joints. When he knelt awkwardly to look underneath the car, Margaret placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Robert, careful with your back." "I just need to check something," he said, his voice strange. A tall man in an immaculate suit approached them, his practiced smile not quite reaching his eyes. His name tag identified him as Victor Caldwell, sales manager. "Good afternoon," he said, his gaze sweeping over their modest clothing. "Can I help you find something?" Margaret smiled warmly. "My husband is interested in this Mustang. It's just like one he owned in his youth." Victor's expression shifted subtly. "The '67 Fastback. Yes, quite a collector's piece. Fully restored with original specifications. It's priced at $189,500. Robert had risen to his feet but wasn't listening. He was peering through the driver's side window. "Could we see the interior?" Margaret asked. Victor hesitated. "I'm afraid this vehicle is by appointment only for qualified buyers. We have a very interested collector arriving tomorrow to finalize the purchase." "We just want to look inside. My husband owned one exactly like this when we were young." "Everyone owned one exactly like this," Victor said with a tight smile. "It's why they're iconic. Now perhaps I could interest you in some brochures. We do have more accessible options at our sister dealership across town." Robert finally turned from the car. "The VIN number. Could you tell me the VIN?" Victor blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I'm afraid that information is only available to serious buyers with financing pre-approval." "Please," Robert said, his voice uncharacteristically firm. "It's important." Sir, as I mentioned, this vehicle is reserved for viewing by appointment only for qualified buyers. Now, I don't mean to be rude, but we have clients waiting. Margaret noticed a younger salesperson watching their interaction with visible discomfort. The woman took a step forward but stopped when Victor gave her a warning glance. My husband just wants to sit in it. Just for a moment, Margaret pressed. It would mean the world to him. Victor's professional veneer cracked slightly. Ma'am, this is a rare collector's vehicle, not a museum exhibit. The seats alone are worth thousands. I understand nostalgia, but we can't have just anyone climbing in and out of these vehicles. Just anyone? Robert echoed quietly. I simply mean that without serious buying intent. I know what you mean, Robert interrupted, a lifetime of dignity evident in his straight posture despite his age. You took one look at us and decided we couldn't afford it. Victor's smile became strained. Sir, that's not what I— It's exactly what you meant, Robert said. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. I'd like to speak with the owner. Mr. Preston is extremely busy and doesn't handle floor inquiries. A well-dressed couple entered the showroom, and Victor's demeanor transformed instantly. Please excuse me, Samantha can assist you with any brochures. He gestured vaguely toward the younger saleswoman before striding toward the new arrivals with arms outstretched. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, wonderful to see you again. As Victor led the couple directly to the Mustang, he smoothly opened the door for them. Please, have a seat. Feel how authentic the interior is. Margaret felt her husband stiffen beside her. The humiliation was palpable as they watched the couple climb into the very car they had been denied even a closer look at. Let's go, Maggie, Robert said quietly. But— Please. His voice cracked slightly. Let's just go. As they turned to leave, Robert paused for one last look at the Mustang. I carved our initials under the dash, he said so quietly that only Margaret could hear. The day I decided to propose, RW plus ML with a little heart around it, no one would ever see it unless they knew where to look. Margaret's eyes widened. Robert, do you think— It doesn't matter now. He took her hand again. Some things belong in the past. As they pushed through the glass doors, Robert suddenly stumbled, gripping Margaret's arm tightly. His face went pale. Robert! Margaret gasped, supporting his weight as he struggled to stay upright. I'm fine, he insisted, though clearly he wasn't. He fumbled in his pocket for his medication with shaking hands. Just need to sit down for a moment. Through the glass, Victor glanced at the commotion outside before deliberately turning away. Samantha moved toward the door but stopped when Victor called her name sharply. Robert steadied himself against the building. That car, Maggie, he whispered through labored breaths. I'm certain it's mine. After all these years. Margaret helped him to a nearby bench, her mind racing. Their son Alexander hadn't returned their calls in weeks. With Robert's condition worsening and now this discovery, what were they going to do? We're coming back tomorrow, Robert said with sudden determination, his eyes fixing on the Mustang through the window. Before that collector arrives, I need to know for sure. Margaret nodded, knowing that look in his eyes. For the first time since his diagnosis, she saw a spark of the old Robert, the man who had once built a business from nothing, and she understood with crystal clarity that this might be his final mission. What she couldn't know was how dramatically their lives would change in the next 24 hours. That evening, in a sleek high-rise downtown, Alexander Wilson stared at his phone. 3 missed calls from his mother in the past week. He sighed and set the device face down on his glass desk. The wall of windows before him framed the city skyline, lights twinkling in the darkness, a view that had cost him 7 figures. At 42, Alexander had finally made it after years of struggling to launch his tech company. Another late night? His assistant Olivia appeared in the doorway, coat draped over her arm. Alexander nodded. The Singapore investors need those projections by morning. You should call your parents, she said, not for the first time. Family matters. I'll call tomorrow, he replied, the same answer he'd given for weeks. Your father's birthday is coming up, isn't it? Alexander's fingers stilled on the keyboard. Next Friday. I sent a gift. Olivia's expression softened. A call means more than a gift. After she left, Alexander picked up his phone again, thumb hovering over his mother's number. The rift between him and his father had started years ago. Robert's disapproval of Alexander abandoning the family construction business to chase computer dreams had cut deep. Harsh words had been exchanged, pride had been wounded, and the distance had grown year by year. His phone buzzed with a notification. A social media alert. He had set up alerts for his parents' names years ago, a way to keep tabs on them without actually communicating. He tapped on it and frowned. It was a post from someone named Samantha Reed. Witnessed the most heartbreaking scene today at Preston Motors. An elderly couple practically thrown out when all they wanted was for the husband to sit in a vintage Mustang similar to one he had owned. The poor man looked devastated. The old guy even needed his medication afterward. Shame on you, Victor Caldwell and Preston Motors. Ageism is real. Did you, Preston Motors? Shame. There was a photo, slightly blurred but unmistakable. His parents sitting on a bench outside the dealership, his father hunched over with his medication, his mother's arm protectively around him. Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. His father looked so much older, so much frailer than the last time he'd seen him. And the Mustang. Could it be? He pulled up the Preston Motors website. There it was, a 1967 Mustang Fastback in Highland Green. Alexander recalled the stories his father had told about that car, how Robert had sold it to save the family business during tough times. Alexander had been searching for that specific Mustang for nearly 2 years, ever since his tech company had its breakthrough success. He'd hired a specialized car finder who had tracked the vehicle through 5 different owners before locating it at a private auction 3 months ago. Alexander had purchased it anonymously, planning to restore it and surprise his father as a peace offering, a way to finally bridge the gap between them. The restoration had been completed at a specialized shop, and Alexander had arranged for the car to be displayed at Preston Motors temporarily before he picked it up next week for his father's birthday. He had insisted on anonymity in the transaction. The dealership knew only that a collector would be claiming the vehicle. And now his parents had been humiliated trying to see it. Alexander reached for his phone again, but this time he dialed a different number. "James," he said when his driver answered, "I need you to bring both Rolls-Royces around tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp." "Both, sir?" "Both, and James, make sure they're detailed to perfection." After hanging up, Alexander made another call, this one to the owner of Preston Motors, Richard Preston. It went to voicemail. Alexander left a brief, icy message. "This is Alexander Wilson. We need to discuss what happened at your dealership today. I'll be there tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. He paused over his mother's number one more time, then set the phone down. Tomorrow would be conversation enough. Across town, in their modest ranch-style home, Margaret helped Robert into bed. The episode outside the dealership had exhausted him, and his pain medication made him drowsy. "You should have told me," Margaret said softly, adjusting his pillows. "All these years, you never mentioned what you did with the Mustang." Robert's eyes were heavy-lidded but determined. "It's been our secret, that car and me. I tracked it a few times over the years. Saw it change hands twice before I lost track. But I'd know it anywhere. The dent in the rear quarter panel I could never quite fix, and if I could just look under that dashboard. Even if it is your car, Robert, what then? We can't afford to buy it back." "I just need to say goodbye properly," he replied, his voice fading. "I sold it in such a hurry. Never thought I'd see it again." Margaret sat on the edge of the bed, taking his hand. "Tell me again about the night you proposed. In the car." Robert smiled, his eyes closing. "Sunset Point. You were wearing that blue dress with little white flowers. I was so nervous I stalled the engine twice. Had the ring in my pocket but couldn't find the right words." "You found them eventually," Margaret said, squeezing his hand. "I carved our initials first. While you were looking at the view, my little permanent mark, just in case I lost my nerve. So at least the car would know I loved you, even if I couldn't say it out loud. But you did say it. Robert nodded, drifting toward sleep. Best thing I ever did. Margaret watched him slip into slumber, her mind troubled. Robert had so little time left. This Mustang clearly meant more to him than she'd realized. But tomorrow that collector would arrive to claim it, and their chance would be gone. She reached for her phone and pressed their son's number again. Once more, it went to voicemail. Alexander, it's Mom again. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. Your father isn't well. There's something at Preston Motors, a car. It's complicated. Please call me back. Morning arrived with Robert already awake and dressed by 7, unusual for him since the illness had taken hold. He moved with purpose, taking extra care with his appearance. You should eat something, Margaret urged, setting toast before him. No time. We need to get there early, before that collector arrives. Robert, even if it is your old car, what exactly are you planning to do? He looked up, a desperate hope in his eyes that broke her heart. I just need to check under the dash. If those initials are there, then I'll know it came back to me. Just for a moment, like it was meant to be. And if that awful salesman won't let you near it? Robert squared his shoulders. Then at least I tried. If you're enjoying this story about Robert and Margaret's journey, I'd appreciate your support with a like and subscribe. It's completely free and means the world to me as a storyteller. Thank you for being here. At Preston Motors, Victor Caldwell arrived early, whistling as he unlocked the showroom. Yesterday's post by Samantha about the elderly couple had gained traction overnight, hundreds of angry comments flooding the dealership's social media pages. He'd have to speak with her about company loyalty. Perhaps it was time for a staffing change. He straightened the placard beside the Mustang. The mysterious collector was scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m. to finalize the purchase. Victor had never met him. All arrangements had been made through intermediaries, but a buyer willing to pay significantly above market value without haggling was Victor's favorite kind of client. Samantha arrived next, her expression cooling when she saw Victor. "Good morning, Samantha," he said with false warmth. "We need to discuss your social media activities." She met his gaze directly. "Those people deserved better, Victor." The old man was ill. "Our job is to sell cars, not provide therapy for every nostalgic senior who wanders in. The collector arriving today is paying a premium. That's business." "It's cruel business," she replied. "And speaking of business, Mr. Preston called. He wants to see you in his office immediately." Victor frowned. The owner rarely came in before noon. "Did he say what about—" "Something about a post going viral," Samantha replied with the barest hint of satisfaction. As Victor hurried toward the owner's office, he didn't notice a familiar elderly couple entering the showroom quietly from the side entrance. Robert moved through the showroom with surprising agility, Margaret close behind him. The early hour meant few staff were present, and those who were remained occupied at their desks, preparing for the day ahead. "There she is," Robert whispered, approaching the Mustang with reverence. Margaret kept watch while Robert circled the vehicle, his fingers hovering just above the paint without touching it. When he reached the driver's side door, he hesitated. "It's locked, Robert." "I know." He glanced around the showroom. "The keys must be in the office." Just then, Samantha emerged from a back room. She spotted them immediately, her eyes widening. Rather than raising an alarm, she approached quietly. "You came back," she said, her voice low. "After yesterday, I wasn't sure you would." Robert straightened, dignity in every line of his body. "I need to see inside this car. Just for a moment." Samantha glanced toward the management offices, then reached into her pocket. 5 minutes, she whispered, pressing a key fob into his hand. "I never gave this to you." Robert's eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. If anyone comes, I'll signal, but please hurry." As Samantha moved to a position where she could watch the corridor, Robert unlocked the car. The soft click of the door sent a tremor through his hands. He opened it slowly. the familiar creak bringing 50 years of memories rushing back. "Oh, Robert," Margaret breathed, seeing how the interior had been restored to factory perfection. Robert slid carefully into the driver's seat, his movements reverent. The leather felt like an old friend beneath him. He ran his fingers along the dashboard, closed his eyes, and inhaled deeply. "It even smells the same," he murmured. "They used the right conditioning oil." Margaret slipped into the passenger seat beside him, just as she had countless times in their youth. For a moment they sat in silence, two 70-year-olds transformed by memory into the young couple they had once been. "Check," Margaret urged softly. "The initials." Robert nodded, lowering himself awkwardly to peer under the dashboard. His arthritic fingers traced along the underside of the panel where a casual observer would never look. Margaret heard his breath catch. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice breaking. "They're here." He guided her hand to the spot. Margaret's fingers found the rough carving, RW plus ML, surrounded by a slightly lopsided heart. "It's really your car," she marveled. "After all these years." Robert straightened in the seat, emotion overwhelming him. He gripped the steering wheel, and for a brief moment he was 20 again, full of dreams and possibilities, the future stretching endlessly before him, Margaret by his side. "We had some good times in this car," he said. Margaret leaned her head against his shoulder. "The best." From her post, Samantha suddenly stiffened. "Someone's coming," she called softly. Robert's peaceful moment shattered. He reached for the door handle, but pain shot through his chest, sharp and insistent. He gasped, fumbling for his medication. "Robert!" Alarm filled Margaret's voice. "Just need a minute," he managed, but the bottle slipped from his fingers, pills scattering across the pristine floor mat. Margaret scrambled to retrieve them, panic rising. "Samantha! Help!" Across the showroom, Victor Caldwell emerged from the owner's office, his face thunderous. Richard Preston had indeed seen the viral post and the flood of negative comments. Victor's explanation that the couple had been difficult hadn't satisfied the owner, who was concerned about the dealership's reputation. "Fix this mess," Preston had ordered. "Find those people and make it right." As Victor stormed toward his desk, movement by the Mustang caught his eye. His jaw dropped at the sight of the elderly couple from yesterday. Inside the vehicle they had expressly been forbidden to enter. "What the hell is going on here?" he bellowed, striding across the showroom. Samantha intercepted him. "Mr. Caldwell, please." "Get out of my way," he snapped. "Those people are trespassing." Victor reached the Mustang just as Margaret was helping Robert take his medication. "You! Get out of that car immediately. How did you even get in here? This is completely unacceptable." Margaret looked up, fear and anger warring in her expression. "My husband is having chest pains. He needs a moment." "I don't care if he's having a heart attack. That's a $190,000 vehicle, not a hospital bed." Robert struggled to steady his breathing, his face ashen. "Just give me a minute, sir." "Not one more second," Victor seethed, reaching in to grab Robert's arm. "Out. Now, before I call the police." "Stop it. You're hurting him," Margaret cried, trying to shield her husband. "Victor, that's enough." Samantha's voice rang out. "Can't you see he's ill?" "He's ill in a car that doesn't belong to him," Victor retorted, his grip tightening on Robert's arm. "A car that the rightful owner is arriving to collect in less than an hour." The commotion had drawn the attention of other employees who watched in horror as Victor attempted to forcibly remove an elderly man in obvious distress from the vehicle. "Please," Robert gasped. "This car was mine. Years ago. I carved our initials under the dash." "A likely story," Victor scoffed. "Every old man claims to have owned a classic Mustang in his youth. Now, for the last time, take your hands off my father." The voice, cold and commanding, cut through the showroom like a blade. Victor froze, turning slowly toward its source. In the main entrance stood a tall man in an impeccable suit, his expression glacial. Behind him, through the glass doors, two Rolls-Royces gleamed in the morning sun, one phantom and one ghost, both in matching silver. "What did you just say?" Victor's voice had lost its certainty. "I said," the man repeated, advancing into the showroom with measured steps, "take your hands off my father." Alexander Wilson's gaze moved from Victor to his parents, surprise flickering briefly across his features before hardness returned. "Mom? Dad?" "Alexander?" Margaret breathed, disbelief in her voice. Victor released Robert's arm immediately, his mind racing to process this development. "Mr. Wilson, I presume? We weren't expecting you until 10. "Clearly," Alexander replied, his tone arctic. "I decided to arrive early. Fortuitous, it seems." Richard Preston emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. "What's happening out here?" Alexander turned to him. "Mr. Preston, Alexander Wilson. We spoke last night." Recognition dawned on Preston's face. "Mr. Wilson, yes, I was just about to address the situation you called about." "It appears the situation has escalated," Alexander observed, gesturing toward his parents in the Mustang. His eyes narrowed at Victor. "Why exactly were you manhandling an elderly man having a medical episode?" Victor's face paled. "Sir, these people broke into the showroom before hours and entered the vehicle without—" "My vehicle," Alexander interrupted, "the one I purchased." A heavy silence fell over the showroom. "You're the collector?" Margaret asked, the pieces finally falling into place. Alexander nodded, his expression softening slightly as he looked at his mother. "I've been searching for Dad's original Mustang for almost 2 years. Found it 3 months ago at an auction in Arizona. The restoration was just completed last week." He turned back to Victor, the coldness returning to his eyes. "I arranged to have it displayed here temporarily, planning to surprise my father for his birthday next week." Victor swallowed hard, looking between Alexander and his expensive suit, the 2 Rolls-Royces outside, and the parents he had dismissed as irrelevant nobodies just yesterday. "Mr. Wilson, I had no idea." "Clearly," Alexander cut him off. "What you did have, apparently, was a remarkable talent for judging people based entirely on their appearance. Tell me, do my parents look more worthy of respect now that you know their son can buy this dealership with his pocket change?" The showroom remained silent as Victor struggled to find a response. Richard Preston stepped forward, mortification evident on his face. "Mr. Wilson, please accept our deepest apologies. This is not how we conduct business at Preston Motors." Alexander barely acknowledged him, moving instead to the Mustang where his father still sat, breathing heavily. "Dad," he said, his voice gentler than anyone in the room had heard. "Are you all right?" Robert looked up at his son, emotions warring across his weathered face. "Alexander, you found my car." "Yeah, Dad, I did." Margaret reached out to touch her son's arm as if confirming he was really there. "You haven't returned our calls." "I know." Alexander's professional facade cracked slightly. "I was planning to surprise you both next week, for Dad's birthday." Robert's eyes moved from his son to the Mustang's interior. "You bought it back?" "For me." Alexander nodded, swallowing hard. "Took a while to track it down. Had to hire a specialist." "How did you even know it was missing?" Margaret asked. "You were just a boy when your father sold it." "I remember it," Alexander said quietly. "I remember how Dad looked the day he came home without it. He said it was just a car, but I knew better." He paused, the memory clearly still painful. "I promised myself if I ever made enough money I'd find it." Victor, sensing the need to salvage something from the situation, attempted to interject. "What a touching family reunion. Perhaps we could move this to our client lounge where—" "You," Alexander cut him off without looking away from his parents, "don't speak unless spoken to." Alexander helped his father from the car, supporting him with gentle hands. "I heard about yesterday," he said, "about how they treated you." Robert straightened as much as his failing body would allow. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters to me," Alexander replied, his voice hardening as he turned to face Victor and Preston. "My father worked 60-hour weeks his entire life, built a construction company from nothing, employed dozens of people in this community. When the recession hit, he sold everything he loved, including this car, to keep his employees paid for as long as possible. He gestured toward the two Rolls-Royces visible through the windows. I've done well for myself, but everything I know about integrity and hard work, I learned from him. Victor had the decency to look ashamed. Richard Preston stepped forward again. Mr. Wilson, what can we do to make this right? Alexander considered for a moment. Two things. First, Mr. Caldwell here will personally deliver the Mustang to my parents' home, after he details it himself. By hand. Victor's face flushed, but he nodded stiffly. Second, Alexander continued, Preston Motors will be making a donation to the local senior center. I believe $100,000 would be appropriate. I understand they need a new transport van. Preston's eyes widened at the amount, but he nodded without hesitation. Of course. It would be our honor. Robert shook his head. Alexander, that's not necessary. It is, his son replied. Some lessons need to be expensive to be remembered. Alexander turned to Samantha, who had watched the scene unfold in silent amazement. You tried to help my parents when no one else would. Thank you. Just doing the right thing, she said softly. The world needs more of that. Alexander handed her his business card. Call my office next week. I could use someone with actual integrity on my team. Victor's face drained of color as he realized the implications. Alexander offered his arm to his father, who took it with visible pride. Let's go home, Dad, he said. I think we all have some catching up to do. As they moved toward the exit, Alexander paused beside Victor. The Mustang, my father's driveway. 5 o'clock. Don't be late. 3 hours later, the Wilson family sat in Robert and Margaret's modest living room. The years of distance dissolved as Alexander explained how his tech company had finally succeeded after years of struggle. I wanted to prove myself, he admitted, prove I could make it without asking for help. Robert nodded slowly. I should have supported your dreams more. I was afraid you'd face the same hardships I did. I was too stubborn to call, Alexander said, even after I made it, especially after I made it. Margaret reached over to take her son's hand. Well, you're here now. That's what matters. Alexander hesitated before responding. Mom, why didn't you tell me Dad was sick? All these months. The room fell silent. Robert and Margaret exchanged a glance. The same reason, I suppose, Robert finally said. Pride. How bad is it? Alexander asked. 6 months, Margaret answered. Maybe less. Alexander's composed demeanor faltered. 6 months. After years of distance, they had 6 months to reclaim the relationship they'd lost. I have the resources, he said, straightening. We'll get second opinions, special treatments, whatever it takes. Robert shook his head gently. I've made my peace with it, son. Having you here, that's what matters now. Alexander wasn't ready to accept defeat, but he nodded, respecting his father's wishes for the moment. There would be time for that discussion later. Tell me about the Mustang, Robert said, changing the subject. How did you find it? Alexander smiled, grateful for the diversion. It wasn't easy. Changed hands 8 times since you sold it. When I finally tracked it down, it was in rough shape. But the initials were still there, Margaret marveled. They were. The restoration team wanted to sand it down, but I told them that part stayed untouched. At precisely 5 o'clock, the rumble of the Mustang's engine announced Victor's arrival. They watched through the window as he parked in the driveway, his expensive suit incongruous with the task of delivery. Robert stepped outside, Alexander and Margaret flanking him protectively. Victor stood awkwardly beside the gleaming car, keys in hand. Mr. Wilson, he said stiffly, the vehicle has been detailed as requested. Robert approached slowly, running his hand along the hood. Thank you for bringing her home. Victor nodded uncomfortably. Sir, I want to apologize for my behavior. It was inexcusable. Yes, Robert agreed simply. It was. He turned toward his son and wife. But today, I got my car back, and something far more valuable. He placed his hand on Alexander's shoulder. Some things matter more than pride. Victor handed over the keys and departed without another word, a changed man carrying a lesson he wouldn't soon forget. As the family stood in the driveway, Robert twirled the keys in his fingers with a mischievous smile that made him look decades younger. "How about a drive?" he suggested. "For old time's sake." Margaret laughed. "I call shotgun, just like always." Alexander watched his parents climb into the Mustang, seeing not their age but their enduring spirit. As the engine roared to life, he snapped a photo with his phone, his father behind the wheel, his mother beside him, both smiling with pure joy. Some vehicles were just transportation, but this one, with its faded initials hidden beneath the dash and 50 years of memories in its frame, was a journey back to what mattered most. Robert reversed out of the driveway, the Mustang purring with restored power, and for a precious moment, time stood still. Alexander knew there would be difficult days ahead, but today, watching his father reclaim a piece of his youth, he understood that wealth had never been about the cars he could buy. It was about finding what had been lost and bringing it home. Please do comment your feedback and subscribe to our channel for more unexpected stories. Remember, it's never too late to change your story.